I hope suffering happens to you. Jensen Huang. That's not the kind of line you expect from the founder of the most valuable company on planet Earth. It sounds almost cruel until you understand where it comes from. Because the man who said it didn't read about suffering in a leadership book. He lived through it, at 10 years old alone, in a place that was never supposed to be his. Today, Jensen Huang runs NVIDIA, a $5 trillion company, the single most important supplier in the artificial intelligence revolution. Every major AI breakthrough of the last few years, every chatbot, every model that can write, reason, or generate an image runs on hardware his company built. He is worth somewhere north of $150 billion. But this story doesn't start in a boardroom. It starts with a 9-year-old boy being put on a plane by his parents, sent to a country he'd never seen, to live with relatives he barely knew. This is the story of Jensen Huang, the Silicon Valley visionary reshaping technology. Jensen Huang was born on February 17, 1963, in Taipei, Taiwan. His father was a chemical engineer. His mother was a school teacher. And before Jensen could even speak English, she was already preparing him for a future she somehow sensed was coming. Every day, she picked 10 random words out of an English dictionary and made her sons memorize them. She didn't speak the language herself. She just knew it mattered. The family moved around constantly in his early years, eventually landing in Bangkok, Thailand, where his father worked at an oil refinery. It was there that his father took a business trip to New York and came back changed. He'd seen what America could offer, and he made a decision that would alter the entire trajectory of his sons' lives. He was going to send them to the United States for school. In 1973, Jensen was 9 years old. His brother was 10. Their parents put them on a plane, alone, to go live with an aunt and uncle in Tacoma, Washington, who were themselves still adjusting to life as immigrants. Here's where the story takes a turn nobody could have planned for. The uncle wanted to give the boys the best possible education, so he tried to enroll them in what he believed was a prestigious boarding school. Due to a complete misunderstanding of what the institution actually was, the boys ended up enrolled at the Oneida Baptist Institute in rural Kentucky. It wasn't a boarding school for gifted kids. It was a reform academy for troubled youth, for juvenile offenders. Jensen's parents had sold almost everything they owned back in Thailand to afford the tuition. Because Jensen was too young to actually attend the reform school's classes, he lived in the older boys' dormitory but went to the local public school down the road. Picture that for a second. A small, long-haired Asian immigrant kid with a thick accent, walking into a rural Kentucky elementary school in the 1970s, surrounded by teenagers serving out reform sentences back at the dorm. The bullying was constant. Racial slurs, physical abuse, all of it. But the detail that sticks with you is the bridge. To get to school, Jensen had to cross a rickety, swinging pedestrian footbridge suspended high above the South Fork of the Kentucky River. Local kids figured out that if they grabbed the ropes and shook the bridge violently while he was crossing, they could try to throw him into the water below. He crossed that bridge every single day. Back at the dorm, the institution required every student to do manual labor. His older brother was sent to work a tobacco farm. 10-year-old Jensen was assigned to scrub the communal bathrooms. His roommate was a 17-year-old who couldn't read and whose body was covered in knife scars and tattoos. And here's where you start to see the kid who would one day run the most valuable company in the world. Jensen didn't hide from his roommate. He made him a deal. He taught the older boy how to read. In exchange, the older boy taught him how to bench press. 10-year-old Jensen started doing 100 push-ups a night. He wasn't a victim waiting to be rescued. He was already negotiating his way through it. Decades later, standing in front of an audience of Stanford graduate students in 2024, Huang told them something that stunned the room. He said he hoped suffering would happen to them too, not because he wanted them to hurt, because he genuinely believed that comfort makes people brittle, and the only way to build someone who can survive what the real world throws at them is to let them survive something hard first. He'd already lived his proof of concept. He was 10 years old when he wrote it. After 2 years in Kentucky, Jensen's parents finally made it to the United States and reunited the family in Beaverton, Oregon, suddenly free of Oneida. Jensen's intelligence had room to breathe. He skipped 2 grades. He graduated high school at 16. He also became a nationally ranked table tennis player, placing 3rd in juniors doubles at the US Open at just 15 years old. And during those same teenage years, he took his first real job, the graveyard shift at a Denny's. He started as a dishwasher, worked his way up to busboy, then waiter. For 5 years, Huang worked that diner. And he talks about it today with the same reverence most people reserve for their college education. He was a naturally shy, introverted kid, and the diner forced him out of it. You can't wash dishes in silence at a 24-hour Denny's. You learn to talk to strangers, read a room, move fast, and never walk between stations with empty hands. That last part might sound trivial. It wasn't. It was a lesson in systematic efficiency that he would later apply, almost word for word, to how he thought about data moving through a microprocessor. After high school, Huang enrolled at Oregon State University to study electrical engineering, mostly because the in-state tuition was something his family could actually afford. He was 16 walking into a major dominated by men a decade older. He later said he was the only person in the room who looked like a child. In one of his classes, in a sea of about 250 students with only 3 women, he met a 19-year-old named Lori Mills. His opening line to her remains one of the more endearing pieces of Silicon Valley folklore. "Do you want to see my homework?" He made her a deal. If they became lab partners and studied together every Sunday, he guaranteed she'd get straight A's. Sundays of breadboards and circuitry turned into something more. And at 20 years old, Jensen told her something wildly specific. He said he was going to be the CEO of his own company by the time he turned 30. He graduated with highest honors in 1984, worked at LSI Logic and AMD designing chips, and earned his master's degree from Stanford at night while working full-time. He married Lori, and he kept that promise about turning 30 closer than almost anyone could have guessed. In 1993, the exact year Jensen Huang turned 30, he sat down with 2 fellow chip engineers, Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem, at a Denny's in San Jose, California, fitting, given how much of his life had already happened inside one. Over coffee and pancakes, the 3 of them decided to build a company around a problem that barely existed yet: accelerating 3D graphics for personal computers. They called it NVIDIA. The early strategy was bold, maybe too bold. Their first chip, the NV1, tried to combine 2D graphics, 3D graphics, and audio processing into one product, using a unique rendering method called quadratic texture mapping instead of the industry's emerging standard. It was a calculated bet on being different. Then, Microsoft announced that its new DirectX standard would only support the standard triangle-based approach. Almost overnight, NVIDIA's entire architecture became irrelevant. Developers wouldn't touch it. Sales collapsed. Huang had to cut the company from 100 employees down to roughly 30. NVIDIA was already, barely a few years into existing, on the edge of dying. NVIDIA's one shot at survival came through a deal with Sega, who wanted NVIDIA to build the graphics chip for their upcoming Dreamcast console. But there was a problem. That chip was built on the same flawed quadratic approach that had just killed the NV1. Huang knew, deep down, that it was never going to work. Most CEOs in his position would have taken the money and hoped for the best. Huang did something almost nobody does in business. He flew to Japan, sat down with Sega's CEO, and told him the truth. He said NVIDIA's chip wouldn't work, that Sega should find a different vendor immediately, and that if Sega walked away from the deal, NVIDIA would be out of business within days. Then, he asked Sega to pay the $5 million contract fee anyway. Not for the broken chip. To keep NVIDIA alive long enough to build a new one that actually worked. It is one of the strangest pitches in business history. Here is your money back, by the way. Please still pay me. Sega's CEO was so struck by the radical honesty of it that he convinced his company not just to pay the fee, but to invest $5 million directly into NVIDIA. That investment, if Sega had simply held on to the stock through 2026, would be worth close to $1 trillion today. With that lifeline, Huang had roughly 6 months to build something that actually worked. He spent half of the company's remaining cash, a full $1 million, on a hardware emulator that let his engineers test the chip virtually before manufacturing it. It was an enormous gamble on a company that had almost no cash left to gamble with. By August 1997, when the new chip, the Riva 128, finally launched, NVIDIA had exactly enough money left for one more payroll cycle. It sold 1 million units in 4 months. The company survived, and it never forgot how close it came to not surviving. For decades afterward, Huang opened internal meetings with the same line, a permanent reminder baked into the company's identity. We are 30 days from going out of business. NVIDIA went public in 1999 and spent the next several years dominating PC gaming graphics. By any normal measure, that would have been enough. Huang didn't think so. He looked at the architecture inside a graphics card, a chip built to process millions of pixels simultaneously, and saw something nobody else in the industry was seeing. That same parallel processing power could be used for far more than rendering video games. It could be used for scientific computing, physics simulations. Eventually, something nobody had a name for yet. In 2006, Huang made the most consequential bet of his career. He launched CUDA, a software platform that let researchers and developers program NVIDIA's GPUs for general computing tasks that had nothing to do with graphics. Every single chip NVIDIA made from that point forward would include this capability, at a cost of billions of dollars in research and development. For years, Wall Street thought it was a waste. NVIDIA's margins took a hit. Stock analysts openly criticized the decision. Adoption of CUDA was slow, almost non-existent in the early years. Huang kept funding it anyway, calling it an investment in what he described as a $0 billion market. A market that didn't exist yet, but eventually would have to. In 2012, a neural network called AlexNet used NVIDIA's gaming GPUs to achieve a breakthrough in image recognition that essentially launched the modern era of deep learning. Because NVIDIA had spent 6 years quietly seeding universities and researchers with CUDA-enabled hardware, they were the only company on the planet positioned to power what came next. By the time the rest of the world realized artificial intelligence needed exactly the kind of parallel processing NVIDIA had spent over a decade building, NVIDIA already owned the entire stack. Jensen Huang manages NVIDIA in a way that breaks almost every rule of conventional corporate structure. He has somewhere between 50 and 60 direct reports. Most management consultants would call that organizational chaos. Huang calls it logic. His reasoning is simple. The people reporting directly to the CEO should already be masters of their craft, not people who need hand-holding. He refuses to do one-on-one meetings, believing they breed office politics and let information get hoarded as leverage. Instead, he runs massive open meetings where dozens of executives, from software architects to supply chain leads, tackle problems together in real time. If your expertise isn't relevant to the conversation, you're free to check out. If it is, you're expected to contribute immediately. He doesn't believe in private praise or private criticism either. When something fails badly, the breakdown happens in front of the whole team, so everyone learns the lesson at once. It's intense. It's not for everyone, but it's also the exact management style of a man who spent his childhood learning that hiding from a hard truth never actually fixes anything. He learned that lesson on a swinging bridge in Kentucky, and he's been running his company by it ever since. When ChatGPT launched in late 2022, it set off a global scramble for AI computing power. And NVIDIA was the only company that had spent over a decade building exactly what everyone suddenly needed. The company crossed $1 trillion in market value in 2023, then $3 trillion, then $4 trillion. By late 2025 and into early 2026, NVIDIA broke through $5 trillion, becoming the most valuable public company on Earth. Huang's own stake in the company, sitting around 3.5%, pushed his personal fortune past $150 billion, eventually climbing toward and beyond $200 billion, placing him among the handful of wealthiest people alive. It hasn't been a straight lineup. The stock has taken brutal hits along the way, including a single day where a surprise announcement from a competing AI lab wiped out hundreds of billions of dollars in NVIDIA's market value almost instantly. Despite running a company worth trillions, Huang has said he still works almost every waking hour, 7 days a week, describing himself as existing in a constant, low-grade state of anxiety. The kid who learned to survive a swinging bridge never really stopped checking for the next one. Today, Huang is pushing NVIDIA past the era of chatbots and into something he calls agentic AI. Systems capable of reasoning through multi-step tasks and working autonomously without constant human prompting. At a major industry conference in 2026, Huang announced that NVIDIA had officially transformed from a chip company into a builder of entire AI factories. Massive integrated systems where electricity and data go in, and intelligence comes out. His newest architecture, named Vera Rubin after the astrophysicist, represents the most advanced computing infrastructure the company has ever shipped. Built around liquid-cooled racks containing dozens of GPUs and CPUs acting together as a single, unified machine. He's also pushing AI in the opposite direction, out of massive data centers and onto personal devices, with hardware capable of running enormous AI models locally on something as small as a laptop. Huang has become something more than a CEO at this point. He moves through global trade negotiations between the United States and China, helping shape the rules around who gets access to the most advanced chips on the planet. A strange, full-circle echo of the table tennis diplomacy of decades past. The boy who scrubbed bathroom floors in a Kentucky reform school, who got his bridge shaken by bullies every morning, who washed dishes at a Denny's at 16, now sits at the center of the most important technological shift of this century. He didn't get there by avoiding hardship. He went looking for it, again and again on purpose, because somewhere along the way he decided that was the only path that actually worked. He told a room full of Stanford students he hoped suffering would happen to them. He wasn't joking. He meant it as the highest compliment he could give. If this one hit different, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.